أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. We were discussing verse number 97 of Surah Nisa, and in that verse we were informed about a conversation between the angels who take the soul of a person and the person whose soul is being taken. And that was about migration, why you did not migrate. I read the verse again, and then we go to the point where we left in our last session. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ ظَالِمِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, those whom the angels take away while they are wronging themselves. قالوا فيما كنتم قالوا كنا مستضعفين في الأرض. They ask, what state were you in? They reply, we were abased in the land. قالوا ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة فتهاجروا فيها. They say, the angels, was not Allah's earth vast enough so that you might migrate in it? فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمُ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. The refuge of such shall be hell, and it is an evil destination. Now, the conversation is very important theologically to know that there would be such a sort of interaction between the angels of death and the person whose soul is being taken. Is this conversation goes for everyone, for the good and bad, or only for bad people, or only in this case? What we understand from other verses of the Quran is that this conversation is for everyone. الَّذِينَ تَتَوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ طَيِّبِينَ يَقُولُونَ سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ طِبْتُمْ. Those whose soul are taken by angels while they are pure, the angels greet them and they tell them, they inform them that you have been purified and you are, and in other verses, you are qualified for paradise and things like that. Now in this conversation, and of course we have the same conversation between the angels and the person in other verses about the evil people, and also in other verses about the good people. Now, we came to this verse, to this sentence, قَالُوا أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. When they said, we were abased on the earth, we were weak, we were seen as weak, or we were kept weak, so we could not migrate, they say, قَالُوا أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً. Was not Allah's earth vast enough so that you might migrate in it? Now, notice how the angels, what the expression the angels use about the earth, Ardullah, the earth of Allah. And we can understand from this expression that how the angels view the world is different from how we view the world. They view the world, they view the earth as a possession of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has allowed us to live on. In Surah Mu'minun we have قُلْ لِمَنِ الْأَرْضُ وَمَنْ فِيهَا. To whom belongs the earth and whoever is on it. And this is a very thought-provoking expression, that we are here living on an earth which belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, we build houses, dwellings, things like that. But even if we have no house, we are living on the land, on the earth which belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is how they view it. Alam takun ardullahi wasi'ah. The other thing that we can understand from this expression of the angels, there's a world of meanings. The way they are expressing themselves. And that is, everywhere is equally God's land. And though a certain group may be born in one place and other group born in another place, but all that belong to Allah, and people can move and should be able to move freely. Of course, the political setting that we have created for ourselves nowadays may not allow that, but that is not something which Allah initially entrusted us. When He entrusted us with living on the earth, He did not have, probably, He didn't want us to create such limitations for ourselves. And if the earth everywhere belongs to Allah, you must feel the liberty to move from your current dwelling to another, current residence to another residence, and you will find Allah bountiful. وَمَنْ يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ يَجِدْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, as we had it, مُرَاغَمًا كَثِيرًا وَسَعَةً. Whoever migrates in the way of Allah will find many havens and plenitude on the earth. And another thing that we can understand from that expression, the way the angels define the earth, Ardullah, is that there is no inherent value in any place. Yes, of course, Allah may bless some places spiritually, but apart from that, there is no inherent value anywhere. Yes, some places may be better for living than others, but this nationalism that has sometimes infatuated some people, there is no basis for it. There is no logic behind it. Everywhere is Ardullah. Instead of associating value, this is how we understand it. Instead of associating value and holiness to certain places, for example, where we are born, we have to attach value to the relation, our relation with the place. Can we serve God? Can we worship God in that place or not? That is a valuable place. And in fact, every place that Allah has called blessed in the Quran, has called sanctified, are those lands in which Allah are worshipped. That is how the value is attached. Now, after informing us of this conversation between the angels and the soul of those souls taken by them, these people who have no good excuse for not migrating, we are informed that فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمْ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. The refuge of such people shall be hell, and it's an evil destination. This is quite moving, isn't it? If you cannot practice your faith and you still stay in a place, in a land, in a country, in a city, and you do not leave that place to somewhere that you can practice your faith, you can serve God, you can worship God, which is the main purpose of human being on this earth. مَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Human and jinn are created to worship me, which is thousands of logic behind that worship. Then, if you don't, in fact, the other side of that is hell. It transpires on the Day of Judgment that you were actually residing in fire of hell while you were not aware of that. Now, I want to quote something in this relation from Allama Tabatabai Rahmatullah Alayhi, which says that this, of course, this verse is about those who did not migrate at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, from Mecca to Medina. They had possessions there, they had estates, they had their life there. They didn't want to leave their comfort zone to a place where they did not know what will happen to them. And this is something that he says, this is about them. However, this is applicable to every time and place if people are in the same situation, similar situation. He says, I just quote him directly, the criteria in these verses are applicable to Muslims in all times and places. It is their responsibility to reside where they are capable of learning about their religion and applying its practices. And you can add to that, where they are not forced to teach their children to learn things which are and accept things which are contrary to their faith. They must migrate from lands where they cannot access religious teachings or cannot follow its laws. What is today called the House of Islam, Dar al-Islam, and the House of Polytheism, Dar al-Shirk, is completely irrelevant to this discussion, because you may live in a Muslim country, but they do not allow you to practice some aspects of your faith. So this is now irrelevant because the names have been disfigured. There is a wide gap between the labels and what they actually signify. This is very thought-provoking, actually, very deep. Today, religion has become an identity like a national identity. Islam is a mere label that is applied irrespective of one's adherence to Islamic beliefs and practices. However, what is recognized in the Noble Quran is the essence of Islam, submission, not its name. The Quran holds the people accountable to the spirit of the law, not to the letter of the law. So he said that this verse is applicable at all times and places, although the context is about those people who did not migrate at the time of the Prophet. Baydawi has reported a very beautiful hadith in his tafsir from the Prophet, peace be upon him. He says, "Man farra bidinihi min ardin ila ardin, wa in kana shibran min al-ard, istawjibat lahu al-jannah. وكان رفيق أبيه إبراهيم ونبيه محمد عليه الصلاة والسلام." Whoever escapes because of his religion, escapes with his religion, they do not allow his religion to be practiced, so escapes with his religion from a land to another land, even if it is for a few inches. Very interesting. وإن كان شبرا من الأرض. Even if it's for a cubit, for a few inches, paradise becomes his reward. And he will become a company of his father Ibrahim, because Ibrahim is the father of all faith. And a companion of his Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. Okay, verse number 98. In this verse, which we are reviewing, it says that when the angels tell them why you did not migrate, they say, we were mustad'afin. But this is not accepted from them, except from who? إِلَّا الْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ لا يستطيعون حيلة ولا يهتدون سبيلا, except the abased among men, women and children who have neither access to any means nor are guided to any way. You know, the main reason for those who had the ability, physically and in terms of means, to migrate was, of course, their comfort zone in Mecca. They didn't want to do it. And if we think about it, deeply, we can understand how difficult it was for those who migrated. And that's why they are very much commended in different verses of the Quran. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. This hajaru, migrated, is very important. Now, they left everything in Mecca. They did not let them to take their possessions. They left behind many members of their family, relatives, because they were polytheists. This was difficult. So the major challenge that made the Meccan Muslims reluctant to migrate was that they didn't know what would happen to them in Medina while they go as destitute people. They do not take any belonging in any property with themselves. You have heard about Ahlul Suffa, people who just lived near the mosque on a small platform or a bench-like thing. They lived there. These were not people with absolute poverty in Mecca. Many of them had great wealth there. But when they came to Medina, and when Medinan people, the Al-Ansar, they shared whatever they had with many of them, and they didn't have more, then some of them had to just live beside the mosque without anything. Ahlul Suffa, these were the people. And that was the main reason. Now, such excuse was not acceptable. And that's why the previous verse said that قَالُوا كُنَّا مُسْتَضْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. We were mustad'af. Mustad'af in the sense that they did not allow to take us our property. They did not allow us to take some members of our family with us. So we were mustad'af. No, this is not istid'af. This is not to be abased. This is not to be weak. You could just take your soul and go. So this excuse was not acceptable. The excuse that is acceptable is what is mentioned in this verse. Those abased among men, women, and children who have neither access to any means nor are guided to any way. لا يستطيعون حيلة ولا يهتدون سبيلا. Now, hila, which is means, is that they don't have the means for travel. لا يهتدون سبيلا may mean different things. One of them is that they don't know how to go from Mecca to Medina. They don't know the way. I mean, ordinary people usually don't know. And they had no guide. لا يهتدون سبيلا, they find no way, are guided to not to any way, so they couldn't go. لا يهتدون سبيلا. Or it means that they are not capable of designing, of planning with some other people so that they have them moved from Mecca to Medina. إلا المستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والولدان. And this sort of elaboration, men, women, and children. Women and children were dependents, of course, and putting Rajal, men, in that line shows that these men also were dependent. They were either old or they couldn't find any way or things like that, as it explains. So, first of all, it says that there were three, all three groups here were actually living in Mecca as Muslims, but they could not migrate. من الرجال والنساء والولدان. Men, women, and children. All these three categories of people were still in Mecca. Some could migrate, but they didn't want. These are those who angels warned them. But these groups who couldn't find any way or any means are among, they could be found among men, women, and children. And لا يستطيعون حيلة ولا يهتدون سبيلا. مجمع البيان says لا يستطيعون حيلة ولا يهتدون سبيلا في الخلاص من مكة. They could not find any means or way to save themselves or safely leave Mecca. استطاعة الحيلة, finding a means finding the necessary means, like for example a camel, a caravan, and things like that, so that they travel with that, by that. And اهتداء السبيل لا يهتدون سبيلا means finding the way towards Mecca. When Musa alayhi salam came out of Misr, فلما توجه تلقاء مدين, he was told to go to Madian, or he knew that he had to go to Madian because Shu'aib was there. This was outside the reach of and sovereignty of Pharaoh, but he didn't know the way. فلما توجه تلقاء مدين, so when he came out to the direction of Madian, قال عسى أن يهديني ربي سواء السبيل. I hope my Lord guides me. But these people, of course, were not Moses, so that the Lord guides them. Now, a few hadith here, let me narrate a few hadiths about these people, those who were abased in Mecca. Ibn Abbas was a very young child at that time, before migration. He was born 3 years before Hijrah, so say he was about 4 or 5 years old. Say my mother and I were among the mustad'afin in Mecca. We were among those who were mustad'af. Neither me nor my mother could actually travel. And in another hadith, he includes his father as well, Abbas, and my father Abbas. But this is probably manipulation of later reporters who wanted to make something in favor of Abbas. Abbas, we know that Abbas did not become a Muslim until very early, quite close to the conquest of Mecca, and he was taken as a captive in Battle of Badr. So this may be something which Banu Abbas wanted wanted people to believe. It's narrated also that when the Prophet prayed in Medina, either during the prayer or after, he used to pray, "O God, deliver the weak Muslims who have neither access to any means nor are guided to any way from the hand of the polytheists." And he would mention some of them by name. This shows these people were a real concern for the Prophet and for those who had migrated. They did not have any power or ability to go, and they were under pressure. And also, even if they weren't under the pressure, they could not practice their faith. And those people, specifically some of these people, are named in certain narrations. He says, in one narration, it is said that كان النبي يدعو عقب صلاة الظهر اللهم خلص الوليد وسلامة بن هشام وأياش بن أبي ربيعة وضعافة المسلمين من أيدي المشركين. Oh God, release these people, Walid, Salamat ibn Hisham, Ayyash ibn Abi Rabi'ah, and all those weak along with them, from the hand of mushrikeen. We had in verse 75 the rebuke from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to those who were reluctant to fight. in Badr. It says, وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا أَخْرِجْنَا مِنْ هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ الظَّالِمِ أَهْلَهَا. What is wrong with you that you do not fight in the way of Allah and in the way of those mustad'afin, men, women and children, who say, Ya Allah, save us, release us from the hand of this, release us from this city whose inhabitants are oppressors, zalim. And this shows, even though at times they could not fight to release them, to free them, but the concern was there, and the Prophet was praying, and other Muslims as well, as a matter of concern for these people. And also it shows the importance of dua. If you cannot do anything, just dua is good. It shows your affiliation. Just like in our time, there are things which are happening, genocide happening in our time. We cannot do anything about it. But dua is good so that Allah protect them. Now, about these people, verse number 99 says, فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُوَ عَنْهُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًّا غَفُورًا. Maybe Allah will excuse them. Who? Those mustad'afin, who cannot find any means or guided to any way. Maybe Allah will excuse them, for Allah is all excusing, all forgiving. Now, they actually did not stay in Mecca of their own will. They really wanted to get rid of the oppression in Mecca. However, Allah says maybe Allah will excuse them. I mean, we can find several ways to interpret this. One way is that, of course, Allah excuses them if they are pious, if they are worshippers in their heart, even if they cannot practice it, or things like that. But Al-Baydawi in Anwar al-Tanzil says that why this kalimatul itma', giving just hope, not saying definitively that Allah will forgive them. He said because not migrating was a great sin, actually. I mean, we have seen this in many verses of the Quran. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يُهَاجِرُوا فَمَا لَكُمْ مِنْ وِلَايَتِهِمْ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. Those who believed and did not migrate, you have no bond with them. So it was very important, because Prophet wanted them to come and practice their faith. It's not just saying, okay, we confess Islam without being able to practice it. So he said, because abandoning Hijrah was a very grave thing, enormously grave. So even those who were not able to migrate, they should know that if there was in their heart that intention that as soon as they find a way, they will leave, then Allah would forgive them. But for others, this is how Al-Baydawi interprets this in Anwar al-Tanzil. And then, فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُوَ عَنْهُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًّا غَفُورًا. All excusing, all forgiving. Afu is someone who always forgives. Af. Ghafur, someone who covers. Of course, the translation here gives Ghafur as all forgiving and Afu as all excusing. But we know the difference between Af and Ghufran. Af is just to forgive. Ghufran is to remove the traces of the sin. This is Ghufran. One very interesting thing in the verse is the term kana, which means, and Allah was Afuwan Ghafura. It's translated that Allah is, and it's the right translation, because kana sometimes is divested of time. But there's something interesting here. Kana Allahu Ghafuran Rahima. In Majma' al-Bayan, he says, why the past tense is used, meaning that this has been the habit of Allah with everyone in the past, up till present, and in the future. Always he has forgiven his servants by his af. Kana Allahu Ghafuran Ghafur. And as I said, Ghafur is someone who forgives all the time, and Ghafur is sometimes who even removes the traces of what was the subject of forgiveness. Covers Ghafur. Ghafuran, Ghafura. Now, usually the Quran uses Ghafuran, Ghafura, and Ghafuran Rahima, except in one place in Surah As-Saba. But usually Ghafur comes before Ghafur and Ghafur comes before Rahim. As we have in the last verses of Surah Baqarah, wa'afu anna waghfir lana warhamna. Af, then maghfirah, then rahmah. If the traces of evil is taken away from one's soul, it opens the way for the rahmah of Allah to fall down and to cover the heart and the soul. Inshallah, all of us would be subject to af and maghfirah and rahmah. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْوَهَّابُ وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.